My sister-in-law pointed her finger at my face and said, "If you take our money, you'll do this wedding our way." I didn't answer her at first. My breath caught in my throat, a tiny, sharp pause I hope no one noticed. The room felt colder than it should have, even with everyone crowding around the kitchen island, their voices rising like steam from a boiling pot. I could still feel the sting of her words on my cheek, as if she'd left a fingerprint there. The overhead light hummed, harsh and white, flattening every shadow the way judgment flattens dignity. For a moment, all I could see was the envelope on the counter, thick, cream-colored, still carrying the faint scent of someone else's expectations. I'd accepted it a week earlier with gratitude, foolishly believing a gift meant generosity, not ownership. My fingers brushed the edge of it now, the paper warm from so many hands passing it around as if it belonged to them. I swallowed hard. "I see," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. The words hardly made a ripple in the room. They didn't want to hear me. They wanted compliance. That realization landed like a weight in my chest. A murmur rolled through the group, a mix of annoyance and satisfaction. Someone shifted behind me, the scrape of a chair's leg cutting through the air, a small sound but sharp enough to make my shoulders tighten. I forced myself not to flinch. My soon-to-be sister-in-law leaned closer, her perfume too sweet, cloying, something that stuck in the back of my throat. "It's simple," she said. "If you don't want input, don't take money. But if we're helping, we expect things to be appropriate." Appropriate. As if my wedding, the day I'd hoped would be intimate, small, mine, was a family project they needed to correct. I ran my thumb across the rim of a glass on the counter, feeling the faint ridge left by years of use. A tiny detail, but it steadied me. Sometimes the smallest, clearest objects keep you from falling apart. I looked around at them. Siblings, in-laws, cousins, people who rarely called me unless they wanted something. Their eyes were bright with a strange excitement, as if they were designing a show, not intruding on my life. Dresses, colors, roles, guest lists. Their voices overlapped, each demand louder than the last. They weren't even arguing with me anymore. They were arguing with each other about how I should live. A soft buzzing filled my head, a hum of disbelief. I hadn't felt this small in years. My fiancé stood across the room, frozen in place, his hands resting on the back of a chair. His eyes met mine for a second. Just a second. But the helpless look there told me everything. He was overwhelmed, cornered, maybe even embarrassed. But he said nothing. Not yet. Another voice piped up from behind me, a cousin I barely spoke to. "And make sure Aunt Carol does the flowers. She already said she'd help. That'll save money." "I didn't say that," Aunt Carol muttered, but no one heard her. Someone else laughed. "This will be the wedding of the decade. Everyone will be there." Everyone but me, I thought. A flicker of heat rose in my chest. Anger, faint but growing. I pressed my palm to the cool counter, trying to ground myself. The silence inside me was louder than their noise. I lifted the envelope. The room quieted just enough for the sound of paper brushing my skin to matter. "We didn't realize the gifts came with conditions," I said. A few heads turned. "We thought you offered help out of love," I continued. "Not control." A snort from the corner. "Control? Don't be dramatic. We're just organizing things." Organizing, as if I were a detail to be managed. A faint tremble ran through my fingers, but I curled them around the envelope to hide it. I wasn't nervous. I was exhausted. There's a particular fatigue that comes from being bulldozed by people who believe their entitlement is kindness. "I think," I said softly, "we need to give this back." That got their attention. Voices rose instantly. Too loud, too shrill. "What? Are you serious? After everything we've offered? You're ungrateful. You're being impossible. We're just trying to help." My sister-in-law scoffed. There she goes again, overreacting. My fiancé stepped forward at last, But even then, the words caught in his throat. I watched him struggle to speak while his own family filled the air with noise. He'd always been gentle, careful not to offend, but gentleness has no space here, not in a crowd that sees a wedding as their stage. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a thin line of resolve settle in my spine. If a gift isn't freely given, I said, it's not a gift. A heavy silence followed, brief but charged, the kind that changes the shape of the air. Then their outrage returned, louder than before. I could feel the room closing in, the heat of too many bodies. The flickering annoyance on their faces, the subtle thrill some of them seemed to take in, pushing me to the edge. And beneath it all, something colder, a quiet, judgmental distance, as if they had already decided I wasn't the right kind of bride for them to parade around. A small sound snapped through the tension, the soft knock of someone entering the doorway. I turned my head and saw my future mother-in-law watching the chaos, her expression unreadable. She took one slow breath and stepped closer, her shoes tapping softly against the wood. The whole room shifted just slightly, as if they sensed something was about to break. And for the first time that night, I felt the cold certainty that this moment was only the beginning of something much larger, something none of them were prepared for. Because the next words she spoke would decide everything. Her voice was the first thing I heard the next morning, sharp enough to cut through the thin walls of our apartment. I was still in my robe, holding a lukewarm mug of coffee when the phone buzzed again. Another message, another demand she didn't bother disguising as a suggestion. "You caused a scene," she wrote. "We need to talk. Today." The word need pulsed on the screen like a warning. I stared at it, feeling a faint pressure build behind my ribs. My reflection in the microwave door looked unfamiliar. Tired, older than I felt yesterday. Maybe people age differently when too many hands try to pull them apart. A knock landed at the door before I could take a sip. Not a polite knock, a 3-hit command. My fiancé looked up from the table, startled. It might be my sister. She was already up when I left the house. Mom said she's been... But he didn't finish. We both knew exactly what she'd been doing. I opened the door before he could stop me. She walked in without asking. Her coat still carried the cold of outside, a sharp smell of winter air and expensive perfume curling into our little kitchen. She didn't sit. She didn't greet. She didn't even look at my fiancé properly, just gave him a flick of the eyes as if he were an obstacle she'd step around once he stopped breathing. "We need clarity," she said. I felt my fingers curl instinctively around the warm mug, a small anchor steady in my hands. "We gave you money," she continued, "and now everyone is upset. You embarrassed the family. You should have handled this privately." Her tone wobbled just enough to reveal the truth. She was embarrassed too, but in front of her people. And she blamed me for disturbing the illusion she curated like a stage director. I didn't respond. Silence sometimes has a shape, rigid, immovable. She didn't know what to do with mine. She turned to my fiancé. "Talk to her." He stiffened. I think she was right to set boundaries. The sister-in-law's lips parted in a small, cold smile, not amusement, a warning. A hum rose in my ears, pressure building. I sat down at the table slowly, placing the mug between my palms, letting the warmth move through my fingers. A moment of stillness, a quiet breath. It was the only space I had. "You're misunderstanding the intention," she said, her attention snapping back to me. "Everyone just wants a nice wedding, a family event. This is bigger than you." She didn't blink as she said it. Bigger than you. A tiny crack inside me widened. I hid it with a sip of coffee. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "If you don't want people involved, why even have a wedding? Why accept anything? Why invite anyone?" A pulse of heat moved through my chest. "Because a wedding is still ours," I said softly. She laughed, a quick, sharp exhale through her nose. Not when family's paying. My fiancé stepped toward her. Enough! She turned on him, eyes narrowing. You're being ungrateful. We're trying to give you a better wedding than anything you could afford. There it was. The hinge everything swung on. Not generosity, but superiority. This wasn't a gift. It was leverage. A faint vibration buzzed from my phone on the table. A new message flashed across the screen, this time from his aunt. Since you don't want input, we'll attend as guests only. Don't ask for help later. Another message arrived just seconds later. Your tone last night was disrespectful. You owe everyone an apology. A third, return the money before noon. It's only fair. Each alert hit like a tap on the shoulder, but harder, faster, until my pulse stumbled. The sister-in-law arched a brow. See? You've upset people. You always do this. Always. As if she'd collected a lifetime of my sins in the single evening we'd spent arguing. My mug slipped slightly against my palm, the heat sharper than before. I didn't ask for any of this, I murmured. No, she replied. You just ruined it. Another buzz, this one from his cousin. Maybe your mom should help plan. She says you're not being realistic. My breath tightened. The walls of the kitchen seemed to close in, the air thinning with every vibration from the phone. I set the mug down carefully to keep my hands from trembling. A faint clatter sounded from the hallway, our elderly neighbor dropping her keys. The sound echoed strangely, metallic, slicing through the tension for one tiny second before fading. I wanted to stand, to walk away, but my legs felt too heavy, anchored to the slight warmth of the floor beneath my bare feet. The sister-in-law softened her voice in a way that felt deliberate. Look, everyone's upset. If you apologize now, we can smooth this over. But if you keep pushing, she smiled again, slow and tight. It won't end well. There was something unspoken sitting behind her words, coiled and waiting. My fiancé took my hand under the table. A small gesture, quiet. His thumb pressed lightly against my palm, a silent, I'm here. It was the first calm thing I'd felt all morning. The sister-in-law saw it, and her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to feel the air change. A flicker of something territorial, something bruised by losing her grip. I straightened a little. The chair creaked. She heard it. This is our wedding, I said, my voice steadier than before. She inhaled slowly, nostrils flaring. Not anymore, not if you keep acting like this. Another buzz, louder this time, rattling against the wood. A text from his mother. I'm coming over. We need to resolve this as a family. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Resolve. A word that meant decision, not discussion. Footsteps echoed in my mind. The memory of how she stood in the doorway yesterday, silent, watching the tension grow. Something unreadable in her eyes. Something I hadn't dared interpret. I set the phone down. The sister-in-law stared at me like she was waiting for a crack to appear in my composure, but instead I said quietly, let them come. Her eyes sharpened with surprise, because she didn't understand yet. She wasn't the only one who heard the shift in the room. My fiancé dropped his hand from mine slowly, sensing something rising behind my stillness. Outside, a car door slammed. The sister-in-law turned toward the window, squinting. She's here, she whispered. And for the first time that morning, her confidence faltered. My first wedding memory isn't white dresses or flowers. It's the smell of burned coffee and bleach on my hands. I was 22, standing behind the counter of a cheap diner that stayed open until 2 a.m., wiping down menus with a thin gray rag. The neon sign outside flickered between open and a half-dead pen, and the air conditioning rattled like it was held together by prayer. Couples came in holding hands, flushed from engagement parties or bridal showers, dropping words like caterer, venue, DJ, as if money grew on the vinyl seats. I served them with a smile that never reached my eyes, because every tip I made was already spent in a spiral-bound notebook waiting for me at home. That notebook was my real wedding planner, not for a party, but for a life. It was cheap and blue, the cardboard cover creased from being carried in my bag for years. Inside, every page was lined with numbers in my cramped handwriting: rent, utilities, grocery lists, student loan payments, whatever I could put aside for later. The pen marks dug so hard into the paper that if you ran your fingertips over a page with your eyes closed, you could feel the grooves like scars. I carried that notebook everywhere. It lived on my nightstand, in my apron pocket, on my kitchen table. It was the first thing I opened in the morning, the last thing I put away at night. When people talk about dreams, they mean visions and wishes. Mine were boxes and decimals in that notebook. I grew up in a house where money was either a crisis or a secret. My parents married young, too young, and by the time I was 10, love sounded like two people arguing in low voices behind a bedroom door about who maxed which card and why the mortgage was late. My mother's shoulders were always tense. My father's jaw was always clenched. We didn't sit around talking about feelings. We measured security in shut-off notices and whether the fridge had more than condiments and hope inside. Once, when I was about 12, my parents got into a fight so loud the whole block probably heard. The next morning, without a word, my mother sold her wedding ring. I found the empty velvet box in her dresser drawer open and hollow like a missing tooth. She caught me staring at it and closed it quietly. "Rings don't pay bills," she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were wet. She turned away before I could answer. The silence in the room settled heavy, like a blanket no one wanted but everyone was forced to wear. I watched the back of her neck, the way the muscles tightened as she swallowed whatever was stuck in her throat. That box stayed empty for the rest of my childhood. A little square reminder that, for better or worse, has fine print. Maybe that's why I learned to love numbers before I trusted promises. In college, I majored in accounting and worked nights at the diner. My blue notebook came with me to class. While other students doodled hearts in the margins of their notes, I wrote out budgets I didn't yet earn enough to fulfill. I wasn't planning a fairy tale wedding. I was planning an escape route. From debt, from chaos, from the feeling of being at the mercy of other people's decisions. I met my fiancé in one of those in-between places when I was too tired to talk but too stubborn to give up. I was 27, working as a junior bookkeeper at a small construction firm during the day and still picking up diner shifts on weekends because the student loans didn't care that my bones ached. He came into the diner with a group of friends after a softball game, still in his uniform, laughing the easy way people do when life hasn't narrowed them yet. He ordered coffee, black, and a plate of eggs he barely touched because his friends kept stealing bites. When they left, he stayed behind, digging into his pocket for tip money. "You look like you've been on your feet for 12 hours, he said. 13, I answered without thinking. He left $20 on a $10 bill and said, "You should go home and sleep." I laughed, a small, tired sound. "Can't. Shift's not over." He didn't try a line. He didn't flirt. He just nodded, as if he understood something deeper than those few words deserved. A week later, he came back. Not with friends, just for coffee. "I brought you this," he said, sliding a small insulated travel mug across the counter, "so you're not drinking burnt diner sludge all night." I turned it over in my hands. The metal smelled faintly like new plastic and possibility. "I can't accept gifts from customers," I said out of habit. "Then consider it a donation to the fight against terrible coffee." He smiled. "You can leave it behind the counter if it makes you feel better." I did leave it behind the counter at first, but before long it followed me home. It joined the blue notebook on my kitchen table next to my laptop, the old one with the cracked corner and the missing E key that still somehow held my entire adult life inside it. The mug, the notebook, the laptop, 3 objects, 3 anchors, numbers, words, and caffeine. That's how we built our life. We didn't rush into engagement. For years, We were just two tired people orbiting each other's exhaustion, trading shifts and meals, building something quiet. I watched him carry bricks and lumber across job sites until his shoulders were sunburned. He watched me do other people's taxes during my lunch break so we could chip away at mine. Sometimes, late at night, after we both got home, we'd sit at the table under the dim kitchen light. I'd flip open the blue notebook. He'd slide his pay stubs across the table. The laptop screen would glow a soft rectangle of pale blue, the cursor blinking on a spreadsheet I'd built from scratch. "This row is your student loan," I'd say, tapping the keyboard. "If we apply the extra from last month, we shave off 3 months of payments." He'd look at the numbers the way some people look at sunsets. "You make it sound like we're winning." "Maybe we are," I'd reply. Those were the moments that felt like promises to me. Not grand declarations, but small, repeated acts. Showing up to count pennies when you're both half asleep. We got engaged in the least cinematic way possible. Not on a beach, not under fireworks, not with music swelling in the background. We were in the living room, surrounded by boxes because the landlord had raised the rent again, and we'd decided to downsize rather than go into more debt. The coffee table was buried under bubble wrap, and my blue notebook lay open to a page titled "Moving Costs." He came in late, smelling like sawdust and rain, his hair damp, shirt clinging to his back. He sat down next to me, exhaled deeply, and stared at the notebook. "You know what I realized today?" he said. "What?" "That every plan we make, I picture you in it. 10, 20 years from now. Different apartments, maybe a small house if we ever manage it, maybe kids, maybe not. But you're always there." I didn't say anything. The room felt suddenly fragile. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Not velvet, not fancy, just a plain white cardboard square that looked like it came from a discount jewelry shop. My breath hitched. "I can't promise you a big wedding," he said, his voice rough. "I can't promise you I'll never screw up, but I can promise you I'll keep fighting through the numbers with you. I'll keep sitting at this table with spreadsheets and coffee until we figure it out." He opened the box. The ring was simple. A thin band, a small stone that didn't sparkle so much as it quietly existed, like everything else in our life. "Will you marry me?" he asked. I laughed, a sound that broke in the middle. "Do we have room for that in the budget?" He smiled, relief loosening his shoulders. "We can make room." I said yes with my whole body. We didn't start planning right away. Both of us had seen too many couples go broke trying to impress relatives who only showed up for the open bar. We agreed, no loans for a party, no debt for one day. We'd save slowly, quietly, the way we always had. The first wedding entry in my blue notebook was on a Tuesday night. I wrote "small ceremony, 20-30 people max" at the top of the page. Below it, a list of things that felt manageable: courthouse fees, a modest dress, a simple meal afterward. I underlined the word "simple" 3 times. I remember the warmth of the travel mug in my hand that night, the steam curling up into the stale kitchen air. The laptop hummed softly, the spreadsheet waiting as I entered small numbers that felt honest, not ambitious. We didn't tell many people at first. It was our thing, not a secret, but something we wanted to protect, like holding a candle in cupped hands so the wind wouldn't take it. When we finally did tell the families, reactions were mixed. My side was practical. My mother asked if we could afford it. My father asked if it could be done cheaper. There was no offer of money, but there was no interference either. "Do what you can," my mother said. "Just don't end up like us, paying for one day for the next 10 years. His family, on the other hand, reacted with a kind of theatrical enthusiasm I wasn't used to. They gasped, squealed, clapped. His sister hugged us, her perfume flooding my nose, and said, "We are going to make this the wedding of the year." I remember looking at my fiancé then, a tiny thread of unease tugging at my ribs. The phrase of the year hit a different place in my chest than of our lives. But I pushed the feeling down, telling myself I was being uncharitable. The first time anyone mentioned money, it seemed like a blessing. We were sitting around his mother's dining table, the big one reserved for holidays. Warm light from a chandelier cast everything in soft gold. His mother brought out a tin of cookies. His sister refilled wine glasses whether we wanted more or not. His sister leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass. "You two are thinking too small," she said. "You both work so hard. Let us help. We can make this bigger, better." "How?" I asked carefully. She smiled, teeth bright. "We'll contribute. Between all of us, we can cover the venue, the flowers, maybe even the band." His mother nodded. "You shouldn't have to worry about every little cost. Let family step in." For a moment, something inside me loosened. I thought of the blue notebook, the narrow margins, the careful rows of numbers. I thought of what it might mean not to stretch ourselves quite so thin. Maybe we could invite a few more people we actually wanted there. Maybe I could buy a dress that didn't come from the clearance rack in the back of the store under fluorescent lights that made everything look cheap. I caught my fiancé's eye. He looked both surprised and relieved, as if someone had pulled a weight off his back. "Are you sure?" he asked his family. "We don't want to be a burden." His sister waved a manicured hand. "Please. This is what family does." Her words fell easily, wrapped in warmth. I wanted to believe them. That night, back at our apartment, we sat at the kitchen table again. The blue notebook lay open. The laptop glowed. The travel mug was between us, half full of reheated coffee that tasted stale but familiar. "We could adjust the budget," I said, tapping the page. "If they really want to help, maybe we can move a few things around." He nodded slowly. It would be nice not to count every crumb. I ran my finger down a column of numbers, erasing, rewriting. "We just have to be careful. Money changes how people act." He hesitated. "My family isn't like that." I looked up at him, then back at the notebook. I wanted to believe that too. Outside, the streetlight flickered, throwing the kitchen into brief shadow before the light steadied again. The room felt suspended, as if it were waiting for a decision that had already been made in ways I couldn't see yet. I closed the notebook and laid my palm flat on the cover, feeling the ridges of the pen marks underneath. "If this ever stops feeling like our wedding," I said quietly, "we walk away. Deal?" He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. His palm was rough, calloused from work, but his grip was gentle. Deal. We held on for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if we could anchor the future with touch alone. I didn't know then that one day I'd be standing in my own kitchen again, watching that same hand hover in the air between me and his family, unsure which direction to choose, while my blue notebook, my old laptop, and a dented travel mug sat quietly on the counter. Witnesses to a promise everyone else had decided they could rewrite for us. The first sign things were about to break wasn't shouting, it was the temperature. His mother stepped into our kitchen that morning, and the air shifted. Colder, sharper, like someone had opened a freezer door and left it standing wide. She didn't take off her coat. She didn't greet me. She closed the door softly behind her, and that soft sound carried more weight than any slam. Then she just looked at me, not at my fiancé, not at the mess of text messages still lighting up my phone, not at the envelope on the counter that had started all of this, just at me. Her eyes didn't hold anger or confusion. They held decision. And I felt something inside my ribs tighten like a rope. My sister-in-law straightened her posture immediately, as if her mother's presence had given her back every ounce of power she thought she lost earlier. She slid her phone into her purse, folded her arms, and stood beside her mother, as if reporting for duty. My fiancé shifted behind me, rubbing the back of his neck. His silence felt heavier than theirs. His mother walked farther into the room, the heels of her boots clicking against the tile. She took in the counter, the mugs, the envelope, the little patches of cold morning light slipping through the blinds. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of our old refrigerator. Uneven, rattling, a heartbeat the room didn't deserve. Finally, she spoke. So, the word was measured, almost gentle, but the undertone wasn't. You've created quite the situation. My throat tightened, a microscopic flinch I couldn't hide. We didn't intend to cause conflict. You returned gifts, she said, cutting me off without raising her voice. That will always cause conflict. I gripped the edge of the counter lightly, grounding myself. The laminate felt cool beneath my fingertips. It wasn't about returning anything, I said. It was about boundaries. My sister-in-law let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. His mother's gaze slid to her, then back to me. Explain what boundary was crossed. The way she phrased it wasn't a question. It was a test. I forced myself to meet her eyes. We were told how our wedding should look, who must attend, who should stand where, even what I should wear. That wasn't the agreement. His mother's jaw tensed for a fraction of a second, so small I might have imagined it. Family gives input. That's normal. Input is fine, I said. Control isn't. Another breath, this time from both women at once. A synchronized exhale of disbelief, judgment, dismissal. It was the first humiliation of the day, subtle but exact. The kind delivered by people who believed you were naive, unreasonable, unpolished. She's making this bigger than it is, my sister-in-law said quietly to her mother, not to me. She got emotional last night. Now she's doubling down. That word, emotional, landed like a cold slap. His mother nodded slowly, eyes still on me. Weddings are emotional, she said, but this reaction seems unnecessary. My fiancé stepped forward. Mom. She held up a hand and he fell silent. I watched him close his mouth, then his eyes, shoulders sinking by a fraction. That silence of his, soft, collapsing, hurt more than the women's sharpness. His mother shifted her attention to him. You allowed this message to be sent? He hesitated, and that hesitation was its own answer. I agreed with it, he said finally, low and steadier than I expected. A flicker of something passed across her face, surprise maybe, or disappointment. It vanished quickly, but my sister-in-law did not hide her reaction. She stepped toward him. You let her talk you into disrespecting the entire family. The heat in my chest tightened, then cooled abruptly, an internal drop like stepping into a basement without warning. His mother took another slow, deliberate walk around the kitchen, examining nothing and everything. Her gloved fingers brushed lightly over the back of a chair, over my travel mug, over the edge of a folded dish towel. Every gesture felt like quiet surveillance, as if she were gathering evidence I didn't know existed. Then the cruelty shifted shape, not loud, not sharp, but something worse. She sat down, not on a chair, on my seat, the one I always took, the one closest to the notebook, to the counter, to the little corner of the kitchen where I'd built my life. She didn't ask permission. She didn't glance at me for acknowledgement. She simply took the space as if it had always belonged to her. It was a small gesture, a simple thing, but the humiliation of it packed itself neatly into my lungs, making my breath shallow. She folded her hands on the table. Let's resolve this. The lights above her flickered once, a quick pulse. Resolve. There was that word again. My fiancé moved to stand near me, but my sister-in-law stepped subtly between us, an almost imperceptible shift of her body that signaled ownership, territory, hierarchy. She did it without thinking, as if I didn't rank high enough to stand beside him in this conversation. The coldness in the room deepened. I rubbed my arms once, discreetly. The chill had sunk through my robe. My skin prickled. My sister-in-law spoke first. We need to clarify that if family contributes financially, they get a say in the decisions. That's reasonable. I didn't reply. You're not responding, she added, tone sharpening. I'm choosing my words carefully. His mother tapped a single finger against the table. Slow, rhythmic, a metronome marking judgment. That message you sent, she said, implied we were controlling, that we had ulterior motives. She left the rest hanging, suspended in the cold air. We didn't imply anything, I said. We stated what happened. Her eyes narrowed, not anger but assessment. You could have spoken to us privately. We tried, I said quietly. No one listened. Silence fell, but not soft silence, a heavy, punishing one. My sister-in-law crossed her arms. You're being dramatic. Another blow, quick, precise. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, the air scraping on the way down. We want a simple wedding, I said. That's all. His mother tilted her head slightly. If simple was truly your goal, you would have accepted the help and let families celebrate properly. This resistance feels personal. My fiancé tried again. It's not resistance. We just want autonomy. His mother gave him a long, slow look, so cold it pulled the warmth out of my bones. A chill ran through my hands. You're speaking like a man influenced, she said. My sister-in-law smiled, one corner of her mouth lifting. He is. The insinuation was deliberate, a humiliation crafted with surgical precision, reducing me to an influence, not a partner. My fiancé inhaled sharply. That's unfair. No, his sister said. What's unfair is her dictating how our family contributes. Our family. The word stung more than I expected. Another vibration from my phone. I didn't check it. I didn't move. I felt pinned to the floor. His mother leaned back in my chair, shoulders relaxed, sending a clear message. She was comfortable in my discomfort. Then she delivered the third humiliation quietly, almost gently. You need guidance, she said to me. You don't understand how these things work. My breath caught. Guidance. The word tasted like being talked down to as a child, like being told my judgment was insufficient, my decisions immature, my place beneath them. I felt something tremble inside me, a fragile, involuntary weakness. My fingers curled slightly against the counter, the cool surface anchoring me. I tried to steady the shake in my hand, but my sister-in-law noticed. Her eyes flickered to it, then back to my face, a silent smirk. Heat rose in my throat. Shame, anger, fear, all threading together. The air felt too thin. I tried to draw a deeper breath, but it caught halfway. My vision tightened at the edges for a moment, the room narrowing. Then, a sudden knock at the door. Not firm, not polite. A sharp, staccato knock that cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone froze. My fiancé stepped toward the door, confusion crossing his face. We're not expecting anyone. His mother turned her head slightly, listening. My sister-in-law's expression shifted, annoyance, then something more cautious. I finally breathed. The knock came again, louder this time. My fiancé opened it, and in the doorway stood someone none of us expected to see, someone holding a folded piece of paper and wearing an expression that made the air grow even colder. I need to speak to both of you, she said. And whatever words she carried would change everything. The woman in the doorway wasn't dramatic or angry. That was the unsettling part. She held the folded paper like it weighed more than the day itself, her knuckles pale around the edges. It was his aunt, the quiet one, the one who never raised her voice, the one who usually hovered at the edges of family gatherings, carrying trays or wiping counters, always watching but rarely speaking. Now she stepped inside without waiting for permission. My fiancé blinked. Is everything okay? She didn't answer him. Her eyes were on me. How did she know to come here? His sister muttered under her breath. His aunt unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing the creases with deliberate care. The sound of it, thin, dry, insistent, seemed louder than the refrigerator, louder than the ticking clock, louder than every breath in the room. When she spoke, her voice was steady. You need to know what the family chat has turned into. My stomach tightened. My fiancé's mother stiffened. His sister took a half step closer to her, like a reflex. The aunt hesitated for a moment, her gaze softening as it met mine. I thought it would stop. I thought someone would correct it. But they didn't. She handed me the paper. My hand shook as I took it. Not a dramatic tremor, but the small, barely visible tremble of someone whose body has been absorbing too much for too long. The page was a printed screenshot, a group chat thread, dozens of messages. At first, the words blurred together, a swarm of text. Then they clicked into focus, one line at a time. She's ruining everything. She's manipulating him. If she doesn't apologize, we should reconsider attending. She's ungrateful, doesn't know her place. He used to be reasonable before her. We should take back what we offered, all of it. Bridezilla on a budget. And then, at the bottom, maybe he'll come to his senses before the wedding. My breath stilled. His sister leaned over my shoulder, uninvited, pretending she didn't already know the messages existed. People say things when they're upset, she said lightly, too quickly. His mother's silence was worse than denial. It was endorsement. The words on the paper didn't just criticize me. They dismissed me, reduced me, erased my personhood entirely. A faint numbness spread down my arms, the kind that comes when your body hasn't yet caught up to your mind. I lowered the page slowly, placing it on the counter, afraid that if I gripped it too tightly it would tear. I didn't come here to stir trouble, his aunt said softly, but I couldn't watch this continue. My fiancé took the page next. As he read, his face drained of color. His hand gripped the paper, crinkling the corner. "Who wrote this?" he asked, voice shaking. His sister crossed her arms. "Everyone. We were venting." "You know how people are." His aunt looked at her sharply. "It wasn't venting, it was targeting." The sister rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." But something in me shifted then, not outwardly, not visibly, but inside, where a fault line finally cracked. For weeks I had felt like someone drowning quietly in a shallow pool, arms pinned by the weight of expectations and commentary and accusations. For days I had been shrinking myself, apologizing with my posture, bending around other people's certainty. But reading those words, those small, ugly sentences typed casually by people who hadn't earned any right to shape my life, did something different. It snapped something open, not anger, not even grief, clarity. A cold, sharp, startling clarity that felt like stepping into new air after being trapped in a room too long. I lifted my head. His mother watched me with a curious stillness, as if measuring the exact point at which I would fold. His sister stared with thinly veiled impatience. My fiancé stared at the printed page like it was a verdict delivered too late. But it was the aunt who saw the change first. Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. His mother finally spoke. "Let's not overreact. These things happen. Families talk." I looked at her, and my voice came out quiet, steady, and unfamiliar even to myself. "They don't talk about me like that." Her eyebrows lifted. "They already have." My fiancé stepped toward me. "We can fix this. I'll talk to them. I'll handle it." Something inside me softened at his words, but not enough to sway me back into silence. "No," I said gently. "You won't." The room stilled. His sister scoffed. "Oh, she's being dramatic again." But there was a shift in my spine, a new weight to my stance, a steadiness in my breath. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I wasn't clinging to justification or explanation. I wasn't even hurt, not in the same way. I was done, but not finished, because there is a difference between breaking and waking. I looked at the printed page again, then at his mother. "You needed to show me who you really are," I said quietly, "and you did." His mother's expression finally cracked. Not a lot, but enough. And that was when the aunt spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something else you should see." She reached into her bag and pulled out a second folded paper. The second folded paper sat between the aunt's fingers like something fragile. something that might disintegrate if handled too roughly. She didn't give it to me right away. She looked around the kitchen first, the mother, the sister, my fiancé, then finally me, her gaze lingering just long enough to signal that whatever she held would not be welcome in this room. My fiancé stepped forward. "What is it?" Her throat tightened before she answered. "Proof." That single word made every part of me go still. She placed the paper on the table, my spot at the table, and slid it toward me. Her fingertips trembled slightly as she released it. When I unfolded it, the breath in my chest stalled. It wasn't from the group chat this time. It was a private message thread between his sister and another relative. Screenshots, several, printed in grayscale. The thread wasn't about the wedding itself, it was about me. "We need to keep a close eye on her decisions. She thinks she's in charge. If we pull together, she'll have no choice but to comply. Mom agrees. We need to step in before she ruins everything. He'll listen to us eventually. He always does. Don't worry. I'll talk to her and make her understand her place." My place. That phrase felt like a blade inserted sideways under my ribs. I pressed my palms flat against the table to steady myself. The laminate, cool from the morning air, grounded me just long enough to keep my breath steady. His sister's face turned pale, then flushed a deep, furious red. "You had no right," the aunt cut her off sharply. "You had no right." His mother straightened, shoulders stiff. "We don't need to escalate this." My voice came quietly. "You already have." The aunt exhaled, shaky but determined. "I printed them because I knew they'd try to deny it." The sister snapped. "They're out of context." "No," the aunt replied. "They're exactly in context." My fiancé looked between his sister, his mother, then me. Hurt flickered across his expression. Why would anyone say these things?" The sister looked at him like he was a child. "Because someone had to manage this wedding before she wrecked it." My breath caught. His mother didn't defend the statement. She simply adjusted her coat as if preparing for a long, tedious conversation. "This is getting blown out of proportion." I stepped back from the table, slowly, needing the space to breathe. The room felt colder again, the light harsher, slicing the air into angles. "I need a moment," I said. No one moved to stop me. I walked into the hallway. Not far, just enough that the kitchen voices softened into an indistinct murmur. I leaned my hand against the wall, the paint cool beneath my palm. My lungs didn't want to expand at first. A thin, constricted breath, then another. Then finally the air started moving again. Their words from the messages burned behind my eyes. My place. She'll comply. He always listens to us. Before she ruins everything. I'd spent my life bending, adjusting, smoothing edges, shrinking myself to avoid becoming the problem. But here, in black and white, was the truth. To them, I was the problem for refusing to hand over my autonomy. I pushed off the wall slowly, returning to the kitchen. The aunt looked relieved to see me. The others looked expectant, as if waiting for me to apologize for reading their own words. Instead, I asked, "May I have these?" His mother stiffened. "For what purpose?" "For mine." She opened her mouth, but the aunt spoke before she could. "Give them to her. She deserves to keep what was said about her." My fiancé looked at me, eyes searching. "What are you planning?" I didn't answer, not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't fully know yet. All I knew was that the balance had shifted. The fear had drained out of me, leaving something sharper, quieter, more exact. I folded the papers and tucked them into the pocket of my robe. His sister stepped closer. "If you use those to start drama?" I looked at her, and for the first time, she stopped mid-sentence. The aunt stepped toward me, lowering her voice. "There's more they haven't said openly." My stomach pulled tight. "Meaning what?" But she shook her head slightly, just enough for me to understand the message. Not here. Not in front of them. A tremor of warning, quiet and urgent. The mother stood abruptly. "This conversation has gone far enough." "No," I said softly. "It hasn't gone far enough at all." Silence followed, a silence with edges. My fiancé's shoulders rose as he inhaled, preparing to speak, but I lifted a hand lightly, not to silence him, to steady myself. "We're going to step outside," I said, nodding toward the door. "All three of us. I want to talk with him and his aunt alone." His sister scoffed. "Absolutely not." But his aunt touched my arm gently. "I'll come." His mother's eyes narrowed. "If anyone leaves this kitchen, whatever happens next is on you." Something in her voice carried weight, intended intimidation. But the exhaustion inside me had calcified into something else. Her tone no longer shook me, it clarified me. I turned to my fiancé. "Please." He hesitated, torn between blood and bone, between comfort and conscience. Then he nodded. The sister took a step toward him, voice sharp. "Don't." He moved anyway. We stepped outside into the narrow walkway beside our building. The morning air was cold, crisp, cutting through the heaviness of the kitchen. A car drove past somewhere down the street, the faint hum fading quickly. His aunt wrapped her coat tighter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have come sooner." I kept my hands in my robe pockets, fingers touching the folded papers, grounding myself on the thin edges. "What else should I know?" I asked. She hesitated, long enough for me to feel the fear in her breath. The group chat wasn't the worst of it. There were plans, discussions, about making certain decisions for you if you didn't agree to them. My fiancé's voice cracked. "Decisions? What decisions?" She looked at him with pity. Who would stand next to you? Who would be invited? Even where the ceremony should be? They wanted to override anything her gaze flicked to me. Anything you chose. A cold pressure pressed into my sternum. Override? The aunt nodded slowly. And they were confident they could convince you to go along with it. My fiancé's jaw locked. Why didn't anyone tell me? The aunt inhaled a shaky breath. They didn't want you to know. They said they were protecting you. My head tilted slightly. Protecting him from what? From me? From my independence? From the idea that he could choose his own life without the committee approval of 70 relatives? My voice came out level. And the money? The aunt looked away. They saw it as leverage, a way to guide things. Guide, shape, control. That's what money meant to them. Not generosity, authority. My fiancé pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes squeezing shut. "I can't believe they—" I interrupted gently. "You can. You just didn't want to." He let his hand fall, shame coloring his expression. I took a slow breath. "We need space from them, immediately." His aunt nodded. "I agree." He swallowed hard. "What do you want to do?" My fingers tightened around the folded papers. "I want to gather everything they've said, everything they've done, every message, every receipt, every screenshot. I want a full record." He stared at me. "For what?" "For clarity," I said. "Mine and yours." The aunt hesitated. "There's more on the family server. Old photos, planning documents, screenshots from conversations you weren't included in. I can get them for you." A small shiver ran down my spine. Not fear, not yet, but anticipation. Quietly, I asked, "Can you get them today?" She nodded. "I can try." Behind us, the kitchen window slid open abruptly. His sister's face appeared, framed by the shutters, her eyes sharp as glass. "What exactly are you planning out there?" I didn't turn toward her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid my hand deeper into my pocket, fingers closing around the second folded paper. And for the first time since this began, I felt the faint outline of a plan taking shape. A quiet one, a deliberate one, a careful, steady gathering of truth. I lifted my gaze toward the aunt and spoke softly but loudly enough for the sister to hear through the open window. I'm planning to make sure nothing they do stays hidden anymore. The window slammed shut. The aunt inhaled sharply. My fiancé looked at me, fear, awe, and something else flickering behind his eyes. "What happens now?" he whispered. I looked toward the door. "Now," I said, "we go back inside." And as we stepped toward the apartment, the cold air at our backs, the weight of truth in my pocket, I knew the confrontation waiting beyond that door would be unlike anything that had come before. When we stepped back into the kitchen, the air felt thicker, as if the walls had inched closer while we were gone. His mother was still in my chair. His sister stood beside her with her arms folded, one hip cocked, chin slightly lifted, ready to fight a battle she thought she'd already won. The window was shut tight now, blinds angled just enough to keep the daylight out of their eyes, but not out of mine. No one spoke at first. My fiancé closed the door behind us. The soft click sounded final, like the lid of a box. His aunt moved to stand at my side, not behind me, not halfway between, beside me. That single step shifted the room. His sister noticed. Her lips thinned. "So," she said, voice clipped, "done plotting?" I slipped my hand from my pocket and placed the folded papers on the table, right in front of his mother's clasped hands. "No," I said calmly, "we're just getting started." A small tremor went through his sister's jaw. His mother glanced down at the papers, then back up at me. "I suggest you think carefully about your next words." "I have," I replied, "for longer than you know." My fiancé stood a little behind me now, close enough that I could sense his warmth at my back. He didn't touch me, not yet, but I felt him there. I unfolded the first sheet, the group chat printout, and turned it around so they could see. The lines of text blurred slightly in the overhead light, but the words were still clear enough to cut. "This," I said, tapping the page lightly, "is how you talk about me when I'm not in the room." His sister rolled her eyes. "We covered this already. People vent. You're being oversensitive." His aunt spoke quietly. "That's not venting. That's coordinated disrespect." His mother's voice stayed cool. "Those messages should have stayed in the family." I let out a small breath. "I thought I was supposed to be family." No one answered. I slid the second sheet on top of the first, the private thread between his sister and another relative. The phrases stared back at us. "Keep an eye on her, she'll comply. Make her understand her place." "You weren't just venting," I said. "You were strategizing." His sister frowned. "It's called organizing a wedding." "It's called control," I answered. The room tightened again. My fiancé picked up the second sheet, his fingers pressing into the paper. His voice came low, edged. "You wrote this?" His sister lifted her chin. "I did, because someone had to step up. You weren't making decisions. She was getting in the way." The words hit like a slap. "Getting in the way of what?" I asked quietly. "Of us helping you," she snapped. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, "No. Of you owning something that doesn't belong to you." His mother's eyes flashed just once. "You are misinterpreting our intentions." "I'm reading your words," I said. "You typed them. You hit send. You chose them over and over again together." His aunt took a slow breath. "She has a right to feel betrayed." His mother turned to her sharply. "You're feeding this." "I'm acknowledging it," the aunt replied. "No one else is." The tension crackled now, a low hum under every word. I pulled my blue notebook from the counter, its edges worn, its pages swollen from years of handling. I laid it gently beside the papers. It looked small next to them, but denser, heavier, like a life you could weigh. "This is what we were using," I said, fingers brushing the cover, "before any of you offered money. Before anyone decided to fix our plans." His sister snorted. "You and your little notebook." The dismissiveness was casual, but it stung in ways I wasn't prepared for. My fiancé's hand twitched at his side. I opened the notebook to the early wedding pages. Simple numbers, modest estimates, scribbled notes. This was the wedding we planned, the one we could afford, the one that belonged to us. His mother stared down at it with something like contempt. It's small. Yes, I said. On purpose? His sister scoffed. We were trying to give you something better. You were trying to give yourselves something bigger, I said softly. And you needed us as props. Her cheeks flushed. How dare you? How dare you? The aunt countered, turning to her. I saw those threads. You were more concerned about how your friends would see the event than how they would feel. You didn't even treat her like a person. The sister spun toward her. You're twisting everything. My fiancé finally spoke, louder this time. Stop. They did. He looked at his mother, his sister, then down at the pages again. His voice shook. Is this really what you think of her? That she's manipulating me? That she doesn't know her place? His mother folded her hands tighter. We think you've lost perspective. My heartbeat slowed. I watched him carefully, feeling every choice he was about to make. He swallowed. Maybe I finally found it. A slice of silence fell, a clean, sudden gap where no one breathed. His sister stepped closer to him, eyes bright with something like panic. You don't mean that. He looked at her. Pain etched in the lines around his mouth. Why is it so hard to accept that this is our wedding? Not yours, not Mom's, not the group chats, ours. She flinched at the word. His mother's voice dropped. You wouldn't even have this wedding without us. I lifted my eyes to her. And that's the problem. Her gaze snapped to mine, sharp. What did you say? You've convinced yourselves that money buys ownership, I said. That contributing gives you veto power. That a gift is a contract with hidden clauses. But you didn't rescue us. You tried to replace us. His sister laughed once, harsh and humorless. This is ridiculous. You should be grateful. No one else would do this much for you. I tilted my head slightly. Grateful for being talked about like I'm a mistake he made? You are a mistake, she shot back, too fast. Her hand flew to her mouth the second the words left it. The room froze. Even the refrigerator seemed to pause mid-rattle. My fiancé stared at her, stunned. His aunt inhaled sharply. His mother's face went utterly blank, the kind of blankness that means calculation, not shock. There it was, the line underneath everything, the thought they'd been circling but hadn't yet said out loud. I felt something inside me go very still, not broken, not crumbling, set. I nodded once, slowly. Thank you, I said. She faltered. For what? For finally telling the truth, I answered. Now we can stop pretending this is about centerpieces and guest lists. His aunt moved closer to me, her presence steady at my shoulder. His mother rose from my chair, smoothing her coat. Enough, she said. This has gone far enough. You've disrespected us in our own family. You've twisted our intentions. You've decided we're enemies. You chose that, I said quietly, when you decided my place was beneath yours. Her eyes narrowed. You're overstepping. Into my own life? I asked. Yes, I am. Another sharp silence. She stepped toward her son. You have a choice to make. Are you with your family, or are you going to throw all of this away for her pride? The words hung there. Family. Throw this away. For her pride. My chest tightened, not from dread this time, but from the weight of the moment. I could feel the ground shifting under all of us. My fiancé looked at me, just for a second. In that second, I thought of all the nights at the kitchen table, the spreadsheets, the cheap coffee, the slowly shrinking debt. I thought of the way he'd slid his pay stubs across the table like offerings, not obligations. I thought of his proposal, awkward and tender, with that small ring in that plain box. Then I thought of the printed messages calling me manipulative, ungrateful, out of place. He turned back to his mother. His voice was quieter now, but clearer. Don't make me choose between you and the person I'm about to marry. She didn't blink. You already have. The air thinned. My fingers brushed the edge of the laptop on the counter. Without fully thinking it through, I opened it, the familiar hum filling the space. The screen glowed to life, casting a pale light across the table. "What are you doing?" his sister demanded. I plugged in my phone, thumb sliding over the screen, sending the screenshots to the laptop. In a few seconds, the images filled the display. Message threads, highlighted lines, names attached to sentences they couldn't take back. "Since everyone has so much to say," I said, "we might as well look at the whole thing together." His mother's voice rose for the first time. "Turn that off." "No," I answered. His sister lunged forward, hand reaching for the lid, but his aunt moved faster, placing a firm hand between her and the laptop. "Don't touch it," the aunt said. "You don't get to hide this." On the screen, one particular line stood out, darker than the rest. Maybe if he sees what a mess she's making, he won't go through with it. My fiancé read it, his mouth tightening. "Who wrote that?" he asked. His sister didn't answer. His mother didn't either, but the aunt did. "Your cousin." "After a call with your mother and your sister." His mother's eyes flashed. "You don't know what was said on that call." "I know how they sounded after," the aunt said. "Smug, certain. Like they were managing a project, not a person." The sister hissed. "You're betraying us." "You betrayed him," the aunt replied, voice shaking. "And her. I'm just done pretending I don't see it." The room vibrated with held-in rage and two loud hearts. I scrolled to another screenshot, this one a calendar invite, wedding planning meeting. Subject line, "Final decisions, with or without her." My fiancé read it, then looked at his mother. "You scheduled this?" She didn't deny it. He exhaled slowly. "With or without her?" "You were being difficult," she said coolly. "We had to keep things moving." "With or without the bride?" I said softly. "You mean?" His mother's gaze snapped to me. "You were not being cooperative." My hand tightened on the edge of the table. Cooperation means working together. This was a takeover. "You are exaggerating," she said. I looked at the screen, at the words, the dates, the names, at the digital trail of their intentions. "No," I said. "I'm reading." He stared at the laptop, then at his family, then finally at me. "Is this what you want our marriage to start with?" I asked him quietly. "With you caught between them and the truth? With me always having to defend my right to exist in my own life?" His sister snapped. "Don't manipulate him." "I'm not," I said. "I'm asking him to see." My fiancé's shoulders sagged, a man caught between two burning buildings, hands empty. Then he straightened. "We're done," he said. His mother's eyes narrowed. "Done with what?" "With this," he said, gesturing to the laptop, the papers, the room. "With this version of a wedding, with this version of family, with any of this being conditional." His sister's voice rose. "You can't be serious." He nodded once. "We're giving all the money back, every cent, and we're planning something small, our way. If you want to come, you come as guests. Not managers, not owners, guests." The words hung in the air like a verdict. His mother stared at him, expression hardening into something I recognized too well, that cold, punishing quiet. "If you do this," she said slowly, "don't expect us to fix it when it all falls apart." I met her gaze. "We're not asking you to fix anything. We're asking you to stop breaking it." She ignored me, eyes locked on her son. "You are choosing her over your family." He didn't flinch this time. "I'm choosing my future." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "We're not shutting you out. You're stepping out because you don't like the terms." His sister shook her head, tears of rage gathering in her eyes. "You'll regret this. She'll isolate you. She'll turn you against everyone. You're throwing away your entire support system for a woman who doesn't even know how to respect where she came from." The words were meant to scare him. Instead, they clarified everything. I closed the laptop slowly, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. "We're not going to argue about this anymore." His mother's jaw clenched. "You think you can just walk away and there will be no consequences?" I picked up the notebook and the papers, holding them together like a single, fragile stack. "There are always consequences," I said. "That's why we're doing this now, before we stand in front of anyone and promise a life surrounded by people who don't actually wish us well." His aunt stepped even closer to us, her allegiance no longer hidden. "They're right," she said. "This has gone too far." His sister stared at her as if she'd never seen her before. "You're really taking their side?" "I'm taking the side of honesty," the aunt replied, "and you're on the wrong end of it." His mother grabbed her purse from the chair, the movement sharp enough to rattle the items inside. "You think you're strong now," she said to me. "Let's see how strong you feel when you're standing in a half-empty room on your wedding day." I met her gaze without blinking. "If the room is half empty because we kept the wrong people out, I'll finally be able to breathe." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then my fiancé reached for my hand. His fingers laced through mine, firm. He looked at his mother, his sister, his aunt. "In case it isn't clear," he said, voice steady, "I'm standing with her." His mother's face went blank, utterly blank, as if her features had been wiped clean and replaced with a mask. And in that stillness, in that soundless beat where no one moved, I understood that whatever she said next would not just be about a wedding. It would redefine what family would mean for us for the rest of our lives. She opened her mouth, and the first sentence she spoke made the room feel like it had just dropped out from under my feet. She stood there, framed in the kitchen doorway, her purse clutched against her side like a shield. The overhead light caught on the metal clasp, sending a thin shard of brightness across the room, sharp, cold, unnecessary. Her breath came slow and controlled, the way people breathe before delivering a verdict they fully expect to be obeyed. "If you walk away from this family today," she said quietly, "you walk away for good." The words didn't hit like a blow. They landed like a door finally closing, one that had been creaking on its hinges for months. For the first time, I didn't shrink. I didn't flinch. I didn't try to negotiate myself into being acceptable. I simply stood still and let the silence settle. My fiancé tightened his hand in mine. The warmth of his palm filled the cold spaces in my fingers. His aunt exhaled slowly beside us, her expression softening not in pity, but in recognition, of truth finally named, of boundaries finally drawn. His sister looked between all of us, her face flushed with confusion, anger, disbelief. "You're really choosing this? Over your own blood?" My fiancé's voice came steady. "I'm not choosing against anyone. I'm choosing for my future." His mother scoffed. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," he said, "but I'd regret losing her more." Something in her posture collapsed then, not dramatically, not visibly to anyone not looking closely, but enough that I saw it in the slight droop of her shoulders, the set of her jaw softening around the edges. Not sorrow, not remorse, resentment. She turned for the door. His sister followed, muttering under her breath. Neither looked back. The aunt lingered. She touched my arm gently. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I didn't know if right was the word, but it was the only choice that didn't crush me. When the door finally closed behind her, the apartment fell into a stillness that felt different from the silences before. Not weaponized, not heavy with expectation, just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that lets you feel your own heartbeat again. My fiancé let out a breath he'd been holding for too long and leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I touched his hand. "I'm not asking you to apologize for them." His eyes brimmed with something like sadness, but beneath it, relief. He pulled me gently into his arms, and for the first time in days, my body didn't tense at someone else's touch. We stood that way for a long moment, breathing the same slow air. Eventually, I stepped back. The blue notebook still sat on the table where I'd left it, its worn cover dulled by years of use. I reached for it, brushing my fingers across the dented edge. All this time, it had been the container for our survival. Numbers, debts, budgets, plans, a record of every sacrifice, every choice made quietly, every dream delayed. Now, for the first time, it felt like something else, not a weight, a beginning. I lifted it gently. "Let's start over," I said. He smiled, a small, tired, hopeful smile. "Just us? Just us." We sat at the table together. No shouting, no buzzing messages, no voices telling us where to stand or how to shape our lives. The morning light had softened now, slipping gently through the blinds, warming the kitchen in a way it hadn't earlier. I opened the notebook to a blank page. "What should we call this?" he asked. I thought for a moment, then wrote slowly at the top, "Our wedding. Ours only." He watched me write it, then placed his hand over mine, thumb tracing the line of ink. "We'll make it something we can afford," he said, "and something we can breathe in," I added. He nodded. We began listing ideas. Not extravagant, not for show, not for a crowd that would analyze every detail. Simple things, small things, honest things. A courthouse ceremony, a dinner afterward with people who loved us gently, not loudly. No spectacle, no hierarchy, no performance. Just vows spoken without someone else's script in our mouths. The laptop sat closed beside us. The printed messages remained folded in my pocket, no longer burning, just present. Reminders, not wounds. The apartment felt different now, not bigger, just ours. We worked quietly for a while, shaping the outlines of a day that finally felt like a life. Not a project. And as the light warmed the table, I realized something I hadn't understood until this moment. Sometimes you don't lose family. Sometimes you find out who actually qualifies. And sometimes the smallest ceremony becomes the one that finally fits the size of your heart. When I closed the blue notebook, my hand rested on its cover for a breath longer than needed. It no longer felt like the story of how we scraped by. It felt like the story of how we began. The blue notebook is still here beside me, but now its pages feel lighter, as if they finally belong to a future I can name without fear. If any part of my story echoed something inside you, tell me. Sometimes rebuilding begins the moment we realize we're not rebuilding alone. If you stayed until the end, thank you for sharing this quiet turning point with me.